Welcome to this edition of the CHDS Thesis Series. I'm Raymond Bisogno. Today we're here with Catherine Ventura, an immigration officer with the Department of Homeland Security. We're here to talk about her thesis, Plight, an examination of contemporary humanitarian immigration from Honduras, Cuba, and Syria to the United States with considerations for national security. Catherine, over the last 18 months, we've been talking about your thesis and brainstorming in peer review groups, and it's been interesting to watch the evolution of this project. I know that a lot of times we've talked about trying to balance the humanitarian concerns with security concerns. Did you find that especially challenging during this thesis work?
Right, certainly, Ray. I mean, that seems to be kind of a hot topic right now in the news, certainly. And the Syrian refugee plight is very current and it's very urgent. So it's a significant chapter in my thesis, as well as just, the process in general, security screening, what does it mean, what should we expect from it, and how can we focus our attention appropriately.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's probably important to note that you bring a lot of institutional knowledge to this project. This isn't just the result of the research that you uncovered in the course of your work, but you have a number of years of experience. How long have you been dealing with these issues firsthand and really, living and breathing these issues?
Right. I mean, for me, this thesis process was honestly very therapeutic.
Right.
I've done this job for 15 years. I've been a diplomat overseas with the Department of Homeland Security for 5 years. I traveled throughout Southeast Asia on refugee issues. I've also been the director of immigration in Honduras. And so throughout my career, I've heard stories directly from immigrants, directly from refugees. And this thesis for me was a way to capture some of those stories, but in a very educated way, in a researched way where it's not just emotion, and also balance that alongside what our immigration options are for these populations, and certainly what our security concerns are for the American public.
Right, mm-hmm. Sure. And, I would imagine that all of us in our thesis work hope that our scholarly work makes a valuable contribution, but it seems to me that this could particularly serve young immigration officers who are new to the field and rising through, working through up through the ranks, hopefully would be a roadmap for them.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I've done the job a long time. I feel, very indebted to the job, but it's also something that we wrestle with. Right. Immigration is an extremely political subject. Sure. It's something that is significant, certainly in the course of this election year. Mm. And I just think that yes, as folks come through the program or students study the different migrations and these types of things, that it's going to remain important and significant. Mm-hmm.
That's good. I hope so too. And were the evaluative skills that we learned in the course of this program helpful for you in navigating all those sensitivities and nuances even more than you were before?
Yes, I think that particularly we had one course in this program called Special Topics, right, which encouraged us to look at issues from multiple perspectives. And that's what I did in my thesis. So I'm speaking about this topic, right, as an immigration officer, as an American citizen, but also in my thesis, I have fictional scenarios from the point of view of the immigrants themselves, where they are kind of interacting with the immigration programs that are available to them. Immigration law in the United States is very complex. It's very confusing, and it's also kind of country specific. So where you're from and at what time, what's going on, determines what's available to you. So I have, these 3 countries. I just focused on Honduras, Cuba, and Syria because these tend to be in the news recently. And so within these countries, then there's families that are wrestling with their decisions and whether or not to migrate, what's going on, but it's all presented also certainly with research and all that other good stuff. So it was a lot of fun to do it that way.
Right.
It also helped to distill what's otherwise a very complicated, law-heavy policy world. And I also have this idea of just wanting to create empathy and using empathy as a way to problem solve. Empathy is a big component of my project, and that's not feeling sorry for people.
I understand.
Empathy is, just looking at something from someone else's point of view.
Sure, and I think we've learned that when we slow down our thinking, that empathy can certainly inform our decision making.
Exactly.
And we know that good policy comes from good decision making
Right.
as well. And so I know that we've both realized, and I would imagine especially so for you, that people will sometimes retreat to process, especially in bureaucracies. With something as incredibly complex and nuanced as immigration law and as politically sensitive as it is right now, what would you say to those who sort of want to retreat to that simplified view and sort of, if when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail approach to something as complex as immigration?
You hear this in the media. Immigration gets very simplified. Immigration gets very emotional as well. And when people are afraid, the first thing that they want to do is shut the borders or build walls or do things that would just, isolate us as a nation.
Right.
But a big component of my thesis is just reminding the country what our obligations are. We do have obligations under the Geneva Convention that we signed that, particularly in front of refugees, we are obligated to receive people when they qualify for refugee status. Right. And immigration, naturalization, these types of concepts go all the way back to our founding documents. Right. They go back to the Declaration of Independence. Right. They go back to the Constitution.
Right, and we've talked...
It's not something we can just turn off.
Sure, and we've talked about this, and I remember these arguments in class that they aren't necessarily... those protections outlined aren't necessarily for us. Those are the things that we've said are important to us as a nation, and so we've codified them.
They are still ideals that we hold very dear to us. The Statue of Liberty still means something, and it means actually a lot. So even though our emotional response is to shut things down, perhaps, it's kind of just this calming reminder to go back to our basics, what's important to us as a nation.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
I hope that this serves I know it will make a big contribution to the field.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.